Good evening, everyone. Welcome. A special welcome to those of you who have traveled to be with us today. I can see some familiar faces I know from here at the Judge Business School, others from further afield in Cambridge, and I suspect many of you have traveled quite far to be here this evening. So thank you for joining us. I think you're going to be in for a bit of a treat this evening. This is the first of our series for Enterprise Tuesday for the coming year. For those of you that have been here before, you'll know that we explore the entrepreneurial journey from the early stages of what we're talking about this evening, which is motivation and mindset, all the way through to growing and scaling your business internationally. And hopefully along the way, some of these discussions and debates will stimulate thoughts in your minds, as well as inspire you to go and do whatever it is on your own entrepreneurial journeys. So you're very welcome. And indeed, a welcome as well to those joining us online. So my name is Bruno Cotter, Executive Director for the Entrepreneurship Centre. This is one of the programs that we run here at the Judge Business School. And I'm delighted that we're joined by an eminent panel. I will let Florian, who I'll introduce in a second, introduce the panel and take you through the rest of the evening. Florian is CFO and COO for BitBio. Thank you for joining us and taking time out to chair our panel. He has a background in investment banking, as I've understood, also an alumnus of Stanford and Harvard. But Florian's company is now doing something quite groundbreaking in terms of reprogramming human cells and doing the ability to do that at scale. So do have a chat to him afterwards about what he's doing with his own entrepreneurial journey. In the meantime, I will hand over to you, Florian, to take it from here with the panel and our discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bruno. Does my microphone work? Can you hear me well? I'm very excited to be here today. Thanks to the entire Enterprise Tech team for making this possible. And lovely to have you here for Enterprise Tuesday. I've got the great pleasure to introduce Mary Williams at the far end of our panel to you, then Dr. Ward Hills, and Fiona James, who is the founder of Walero, a very interesting company, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you've done. Could I please ask you guys to introduce yourselves? Fiona?
Yeah, I'm Fiona James, founder of Walero. So we currently make motorsports clothing. I probably didn't have the most traditional route. I'm probably a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. Left school at a young age. I left school at 16 and determined to work with horses. And of course, my parents were equally determined that I wasn't going to, which meant I was going to work with horses. Got bored with that, wanted more out of life. So I went and did a couple of courses sort of in equine business management because I really wanted to start my own yard. And that kind of changed, I don't know, lost interest in that a bit. Went to, did a stint as a computer programmer, actually. Learned a bit there, got bored with that. Worked as an office manager, accounts type person for a couple of garages and things. And got bored with that and eventually ended up starting a business with, originally sort of helping back a family member in a recruitment business, which ultimately failed. Learned a lot there. And then eventually started an equestrian centre, sort of doing very much rehabilitation and sports horse training, breeding, sourcing, which was successful in some ways, but ultimately failed. So that led eventually to, I've also got a sort of small farm as well, which I do some rental properties and that kind of thing. We're working on diversification, but then as part of one of my hobbies, I race cars, and that's sort of where the idea for Walero came from, and I just didn't like what I could buy on the market ultimately, and was looking at some phase change materials for an equine project that I still want to work on. But when I found out what it could do on temperature regulation, my next question was, can we get this in flame retardant fabric? Where a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. They said yes, and I said, great, I'm going to get some clothes made and sell them, because, you know, what could be easier? And here we are, 5 years later.
Thank you very much. Ward, would you do us the honors?
Yes, of course. My name is Ward Hills. I originally started off a professional career anyway as a scientist a couple decades ago now as a chemist. And I won't go through the kind of story of how I got up at that point, but the net result of my chemistry career was the year that I was awarded a PhD in analytical chemistry was the highest unemployment for PhD chemists since they were keeping records. So I quickly had to sort of do a side shift to other things. And long story short, I started a business inside the university for a bit and ran that for a couple of years. And discovered my first lesson in business, don't have a single customer. My single customer happened to be the government at that point, and they changed research priorities, and my business had to shut down almost overnight. So I went off to Japan for a few years and worked for the Japanese government on a couple of projects related to essentially environmental cleanup and environmental restoration after some industrial work. And it wasn't the most taxing job, I have to say, after a while. We kind of achieved everything we needed to earlier on, and I had 2 years there, and it was interesting work, but had a lot of evenings free. And this is the mid-90s. The American stock market was kicking off, and there was this new fun thing to play on called the internet. So I quickly discovered that I could sit in Tokyo and trade stocks on the New York Stock Exchange. And I had about an 18 to 20 hour head start on trading in New York. So I knew a little bit about data analysis. I had this new toy called the internet to play with. So I ended up downloading data about companies, doing some analysis and some trends. I think I spotted a few, probably fooled myself a lot. But anyway, just ended up building up a bit of a portfolio with stocks in the New York Stock Exchange and all that. And quite ironically, I didn't realize the irony of this until years later, but one of them was actually ARM Holdings. Which when I found myself in Cambridge years later, it was quite ironic. I met Herman Hauser one time. I was like, oh wow, yeah, I know what you've done. Was in Tokyo for a couple of years, and then through a series of consultancies and jobs and all that, made my way across Europe. I eventually ended up in Cambridge in '98 or so. And by that time, I had done quite a bit of analysis of stocks and businesses and all that, so I could read a balance sheet, but I still had this chemistry background and technical background. So could talk tech and talk business and finance, so naturally sort of fell into the Cambridge scene very quickly. And this was a period where there was lots of, we need to commercialize technology, we need to pull things out of universities. So it was a very lucrative time to be fluent in both of those sides of things. So worked for the UK government for several years, and venture capitalists here and there doing due diligence and consulting on how to pull things out of universities and all. And really fell into a really nice business because of a couple of business partners. They were all former marketing executives in large industrials, aerospace companies and things like this. And they had just retired, a few of them, and had this fantastic network all around the world of these people who had funded needs. So they needed this part of an airplane made, or they needed to source this thing, or they had helicopters they needed to be able to protect in this way or that way. But each one of them had a very defined problem, and probably more usefully, a budget behind that defined problem. But they didn't know how to solve it. Well, I was sitting in the middle of Cambridge, the place where innovation and problem solving is almost a daily occurrence. So I would just turn around to the Cambridge community and say, hey, I got this problem, can anybody help me with it? So the challenges in that were all around translating from the needs of these people around the world to the technical language that I could go over to the engineering department and have a conversation with. So spent a few years in essentially this translation role, looking at needs and who could solve them. One particular one became a quite acute need, was for a medical device. And this medical device, some doctors down at Addenbrooke's Hospital had a very defined need about what they wanted. And they wanted to be able to measure the lung function of small children or people that were unconscious or not able to take part in a breathing test. They defined the problem really well, but not in a way that an engineer could attack it. So I was able to translate their end user requirements into something you could talk to an engineer about, and literally walked over to the engineering department where I had some friends, had tea with them, and I said, I need somebody that can do like this. And about, a dozen ideas started coming at me from this person and this person and this person. About half of them were viable, about a third of them were practical, and we eventually ended up with a company called Pneumacare, and I became the CTO of that company. So I had that role for a while, and really there we were looking at how do you efficiently develop technology, how do you protect IP, things like this. Well, the company ran into some financial problems, and we had to change leadership, and I ended up CEO of it. There's kind of a story behind that, but I'll short circuit that one. So I ended up CEO of it, and essentially what we were able to do was leverage some very, very good relationships here in town, and some government funding we had, and a lot of faith that some investors had in us. And net result was, in about 9 months, we were able to go from essentially a cash-out position, not quite cash-out, but just about cash-out, to a CE-marked product that we could actually start to sell. So we turned that one around and ran that company for a couple of years, and then I moved out of that one. And then based on the success of that one, some of the same investors in that first company said, well, we've got another one for you. So they brought me another company that had been moving sideways for a few years. And we took a look at that one and found out that it was a really, really nice piece of technology. Absolutely beautiful. What you could do with this thing was image cells while they were alive and going about their business, but you could get nanometer resolution image of these things. So absolutely fantastic. And you could do some electrophysiology on these things. Beautiful, beautiful science. Yeah, up your alley. But just because it was a fantastic product or fantastic technology doesn't necessarily mean it was a great product. And it took us a while to realize, but there simply weren't that many people in the world that could afford this product to do that little niche thing. But it still is pretty good, and we were selling a few of them here and there. But my engineer that I brought in, really clever guy, grew up in the mobile phone industry. So he started looking at the components behind this device. And he said, actually, you could make all of these pieces inside this very expensive piece of this component. You could make it all out of mobile phone parts, and we could cut the cost of producing this thing by about 90%. Well, as soon as we were able to lower the cost of goods all the way down to something that was reasonable, it became very, very viable in many other applications. So we started to provide software and services around those other applications, and we're eventually able to sell the company off to something else in a very, very different area. So the problems we were dealing with there is how do you make something, the need for something meet the price and make the economics? Can you produce it in a way that's economically viable? So I exited out of that a few years ago. And then since then, I have been really working on the corporate governance side of things. I sit on some boards now. One particular company is a company that provides cyber security for largely the health industry. We've just launched a company over in the States that is looking at the particular problem that hospitals have protecting themselves against many, many online threats. And my role there is very much about the governance of the company and making sure the company is structured well so that it can handle the growth that we're experiencing there. So that's largely my activities nowadays, although we do have one other company that we're just spooling up now, quite looking forward to. Can't say too much about it, but it's Cambridge Space Technologies. And that company is all about solving some particular problems that you have in sending optical signals from space. And I'll just leave that as a teaser and finish up there. Thanks.
Fascinating work. Thank you very much. Mary, over to you.
So I spent the last few days wondering which bit of my journey to share with you, whether to go with the personal or the professional. And actually, I kind of have to combine both, because what really motivates me actually is world peace. I feel like I need a sash. And it became from the fact that I had a really difficult childhood. I grew up with a mother who was a compulsive hoarder. There were 4 of us. I didn't go to school a lot. When I did go to school, I got bullied because I was that weird kid. She had many mental health issues, which obviously I didn't realize as I was growing up. But I seemed to have this awareness, even as a child, that there was sort of me on the route I'd been given through my childhood, and then there was a me that I could be if that stuff hadn't happened to me. And that's kind of how I believe we all are. So as I grew up, I was a young mum. I had my first child at 17. I had 3 children by the age of 21. I put myself back through education, having not come out with great GCSEs. And by 23, I was doing a degree as a single parent with 3 children under the age of 6. And I went on to have another further 2 children in my early 30s. And all the while, I kind of loved the idea of running a business. And people would say to me, you're so organized and you're so passionate and you bring people together and you build communities. Why don't you start up a business? And I was like, yeah, doing what? Now, the interesting thing is, looking back, actually, there were a couple of ideas that I had that I developed around products to do with children, which now somebody has invented and they are rich. So had I actually had that entrepreneurial mindset in my 20s, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I'd be off on my yacht. Okay? But I just didn't know what that thing was. So in my early 30s, I went on a parenting course. I'd always tried personal growth. I recognized really early on, having had my own children, that I'd been left damaged by this childhood. So I did CBT, and I did counseling, and I did psychotherapy, you name it, and I tried it. I kind of gained an understanding, but it never shifted all those things that were in my way. I always felt like the 12-year-old in the room of adults. I always had a real fear of failure. I kind of just never looked at myself as somebody who would be significant, yet it always felt like there was this other person, this other version of me that could be, but I didn't really know how to access her. So I went on a parenting course, which was run by a coach and a therapist, and had some real experiential change. It was like, wow, this is the thing that I need to do for my business. And so I went and trained as a coach and set up my own company and was suddenly, wow, I'm finally this sort of businesswoman. But I still wasn't really confident in, that being anything significant. And I would work with clients, the clients would walk away really happily, and I just, again, had this sixth sense, there's just something more that we could be doing for these people. And I stumbled into cognitive hypnotherapy, which is unlike traditional hypnotherapy. It's using lots of NLP, Gestalt, Ericksonian language patterns. And suddenly I was listening to my daughter, who was working with a therapist, and thinking, oh, there's some sort of almost like magic going on in the room. And so I went to see the therapist myself and said, these are things I struggle with. I have fear of failure. I feel like the 12-year-old in the room. And my temper, as a friend once said, was 0 to nuclear and 2 seconds flat. And counting to 10 did not work for me. And she sorted it in one session. So I thought, brilliant, this is the thing that I need to add. So I added that. I then trained as a workplace mediator, started working with entrepreneurs, and have built up to working with leaders and CEOs. And what I've discovered is actually people, even in those levels of work and starting out, have all the same things that I have. They feel like the 12-year-old in the room. They've got fear of failure. They've got imposter syndrome. They've got anxiety. They just think it's not them. So it seems like we're all sitting in the room going, oh, yes, it's great that you're really good and you're meant to be where you are, but I'm never going to get there. So my work and my motivation for world peace is that I now have 5 children that I brought into the world, and I look around us at this beautiful planet we're on, and at all of us as the lovely individuals that I meet, and think I want to do my best to leave the planet and humanity in a better position. And if I work with leaders and entrepreneurs, as you build your companies, actually you're going to impact everybody in your company from your mindset being clearer. When your mindset is clearer, you make better decisions, you're more productive, you're more empathetic, and you spread that to those around you. You spread that to your employees, they spread it to their partners, they spread it to their children. So think of the impact from each of us touching out. So my kind of goal is that almost this web of people who are brilliantly healthy mindset, who've got over whatever it is that you came from. Doesn't matter what your childhood is. I mean, I came out of school with D's and E's, it doesn't matter, but that you start becoming this person here. And through my own therapy journey, what I found was I could be her, and actually I could be her now. It's not to say I don't have the odd day when I think, oh, you know, I feel little, but it's momentary. So my view is, if I can work with as many people and you can understand that by clearing your own stuff, it's a leadership hack. The quickest way to become a good leader is to work out who you are, what you want, what your purpose is, what your motivation is. And then when you've got your good idea, then all of the leadership tools and tips will help you. But if you're not clear in your own mindset, then you're not going to get there. So find your motivation, find your purpose, clear your mind and get your mindset. So that's why I do the work that I do and need my big sash.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. So this is a fascinating panel. We've got people who are incredibly diverse and in incredibly different stages of their development as entrepreneurs. Ward, you've made it all the way through many, many times and are now advising boards. Fiona, you've made it through more learning experiences than one can potentially imagine. And you just shared with me that your company has been in hypergrowth for 5 years running now. And Mary, of course, I loved the story around how to develop your purpose and start out as an entrepreneur, knew what you're going to be doing as an entrepreneur. And I would like to start off our discussion at this very point, namely, how do you develop and find the purpose to be an entrepreneur? And I'd ask you to kindly start with elaborating on that.
So in some respects, I think being an entrepreneur is something that finds you. I think it is much like Fiona was saying. You stumble into it. It's something that you're passionate about. You come across it. I think it's something you can't not do. Terribly incorrect grammar there, but that's kind of how I see it. For me, I never thought about being an entrepreneur. Most of the entrepreneurs and business owners that I speak to, they didn't sit down and think, right, I want to earn money or I want to work on my own and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up with a product. Something kind of almost just tripped them up and stopped them. And then they just went, this is the thing I'm going to do. But I think, as we all know, that you can't just have a product, as you were saying, you can't just have that. You have to have the mindset and you have to have the work. It's the thing that when you're sitting there at midnight in your fingerless gloves with a blanket over your knee because the heating went off 3 hours ago, that still keeps you motivated. It's the thing that you get up every day and think, I really want this impact, or I love this idea, or I love this product. For me, it's an innate thing that comes out. And I think for a lot of people, it's there, and then just not stepping into it.
Great. Ward, what are your thoughts on finding your purpose, knowing that you're set out to be an entrepreneur?
I think I very much agree with that thought. I certainly never set out to be an entrepreneur. I had a qualification that I thought would mean something. It didn't. And I had rent to pay. So it was really kind of that basic, that was the motivation behind it. But what allowed me to do it was being in a situation where I could see things could be done differently. And if they were done differently, someone benefited from it. And I happened to be in just a place rich for problems. Where I did my PhD was actually at a nuclear waste dump. So I was very much involved in environmentalism with that, but I was an environmental analytical chemist, was originally my motivation. So we were cleaning up waste from the Cold War, essentially. And it was a very, very large bureaucratic governmental facility, not run terribly efficiently. And because it was a place where you had to assume that everything was dangerous, everything had many, many layers of safety protocols on top of them. So as, what was I, 23, 24 at the time, of course, knew everything. Every thought I had was the correct one. And I was looking around this place and saying, all of this could be done better. Some of it might have been, in retrospect. But the opportunity I saw was essentially that it was all dangerous and expensive because of the environment we were in. But the problems we were solving had nothing to do with the perceived danger of the radioactivity. it was all basically chemistry problems we were dealing with. So if we could figure out some way of dealing with the chemistry problems in a safer environment, we could do everything at 1/3 the cost. And then once you had that problem solved, then bring it back into the expensive environment. So literally one night over a couple of beers, we were talking about how to do this, and we couldn't see any reason why it wouldn't work. So we proposed it to the powers that be at that time, and they were saying, yeah, if you could get it to work, and not expecting us to get it to work. Well, a couple months later, when I was faced with the fact that I didn't have any postdoc to go to or anything like that, it was, well, okay, well, here's somebody who said we could do this. It made sense to them. It makes sense to us. And if we did it, it would save them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this all kind of made sense. So we said, well, why don't you actually give us a little funding to do this? And they said, we're not going to give any funding to do it, but if you do it, we'll pay you. Okay, close enough. So we all set it up, and long story, but some barter arrangements and all that we did to get it to happen. But really, it was being in the situation where we saw that if we took some action, somebody else would be improved by it, and improved in a way they could quantify, and that was a value that we could invoice them for, and it was really that simple.
Mm. So, again, I agree with what both of you have said, really. I think the problem solving was quite a big driver for the current business. You know, sort of racing cars, you regularly are in a cockpit where it's plus 50 degrees centigrade, and the stuff you could buy on the market is expensive because you have to go through a lot of regulation to get it allowed, really, to wear, because it's mandatory to wear it. Most series, and so I was hot. The stuff I was buying was pretty uncomfortable, didn't wash well, and I was spending 120 quid a top and 90 quid a pair of leggings, kind of thing. So I thought, well, surely we can do this better. So it really was finding that solution that was already out there. We're using someone else's technology that was actually developed for NASA to help regulate astronauts' temperature, because they go through such extremes in space. So, yeah, just talking to the company, really, and sort of saying, you know, hey, is this available? Can we do it? They said yes, and probably 18 months later, I think we launched. And we've also kind of added another technology. So again, we're kind of bringing other people's technology into it. So added antimicrobial in there, so it's hospital grade, so antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral, which, if you've ever been in a driver's briefing room, especially at 24 hours, they're not the best smelling places. And, I don't care if you're a girl or a boy, you sweat a lot in the cockpit wearing a lot of Nomex and 50 degrees temperature. So yeah, that's really where it came from, was wanting to solve that problem and sort of thinking surely I can make something better than I can buy already. And that's where it grew from, really.
Thanks very much. So before we delve deeper into mindsets and motivations when we prepared for this panel, I really liked what you had to say, Ward, namely that it also really matters to be able to spot an entrepreneurial opportunity. We may all want to be entrepreneurs, but it's good to know from the beginning that you've got something on which to go. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I remember the conversation we were talking about that. So the idea was essentially, I have lots of people that come to us now and say, well, I'd like to start a business, do this, or I'd like to start a business, do that, and talk about the great product that they have and the technology behind it. Or how they can maybe get somebody to fund it, so they've got some investors behind it. We very often hear a lot of things about this sort of thing. What we're looking for when we're looking to get involved with the business, and myself and some business partners, is really an understanding of why someone wants it and what a path to revenue is for that particular offering. And it really boils down to something incredibly simple. And when someone's speaking to me, if I don't hear this, then I start to wonder whether they understand what the business is about. So the secret sentence is really, I know there's this one person who has this particular problem, and they have this budget behind it. And at any point in any business you run, if you can't, in an instant, name the person with the problem, what their budget is, and what you can do to solve that problem, you have to really question what kind of business you have and if you have a viable business. If you can name those at any point, then you know exactly who you need to go to make a sale. And you know very closely what you can charge them for it because you know it from their perspective. So if you've got those nailed, then you can sell, you can raise money, you can start to plan for product development. But without those key elements in place, it's very difficult to even start the entrepreneurial journey.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be able to say that everybody on this panel has been able to answer this question quite successfully.
Very well.
And now let's get to what keeps each and every one of you going day by day. It's incredibly exhausting to be an entrepreneur, to be your own boss or the CEO of your company. The founder is incredibly responsible for not only what they are planning to do, what their investors expect them to do, and of course their employees. So Fiona, what's the ways you keep yourself motivated on a daily basis?
I want to beat Sparko. Yeah, I mean, I think since race clothing started, there's been sort of 4 or 5 brands out there, and that's it. So we really were the new kids on the block 5 years ago. But also there's the sort of safety aspect, and obviously I've got a vested interest in it as well as a racer myself. You know, we've made huge strides in car safety and everything, but actually people forget about the person, and there's a lot you can do. And if you can help regulate someone's temperature, you're then, you know, increasing cognitive ability, decision-making processes, reaction times are all quicker, all of those kind of things. And it's such, well, as one article put it, you know, it's the low-hanging fruit on performance and safety. Is just such an easy thing to do, really. If you can improve the driver's temperature, lower the temperature, take that risk of heat stroke away, or at least reduce it, but you know, you're safer and better performing. So I think partly that, and partly wanting to then bring it into other markets, and you know, sort of looking at what some other brands out there. There's a couple that I've got in my sights. But you know, you're looking at what they produce and thinking, you know, all you're selling is a brand name. It does nothing. You know, so I think it's wanting to do that better than maybe you can see out there already.
Thanks, I liked it a lot. Mary, what are your thoughts? What keeps you going?
I think it was my own journey, but also my clients. I feel I'm really lucky because I get so much positive feedback from my clients. You know, it's really lovely to have people coming to you, sort of, you know, sending texts even a year later saying, you know, wow, the change in my life has been phenomenal. You know, my business growth is huge, my personal growth is huge. So in some respects, the motivation to keep going for me is very easy. But I think it was going through that journey myself of having gone through all of those different forms of therapy. You know, I knew from a really young age, probably 17 when I was a mum, that I had problems. And it just took till, you know, my early 40s to resolve them. Even though I was there trying, and, you know, I was trying all these different therapies and reading all these different books. And it was just, my motivation is that I want to stop other people having to do that search. You know, I obviously love it when clients come to me, whatever age they are, but especially when I see them younger, I'm like, great, get in there and let's sort this out now. Because, you know, I went through 2 long-term marriages, you know, 2 sets of children, all the while just trying to do my best, literally getting up every day and saying, I want to be better. So for me, my motivation is every day I'm getting up and seeing clients, and I know that even just that one session we do, it starts this kind of ripple of change throughout their life, which again starts to impact everybody they know. So for me, the motivation is quite easy, that it is just, I get to see the change right in front of me, and I know that that's knocking on. And I've even had friends of people and children of people come to me and say, wow, the difference you've made with, you know, my friend or my mother, is significant. So motivation is easy. But I have to say, finding the kind of admin side of it and the things that none of us really like, that's not so motivating. But the rest of it keeps you going.
Ward, what keeps you going?
Well, the immediate answer is double espressos. More seriously, it's as you're asking the question, it dawned on me that actually it's what got me into science originally. You have to enjoy problem solving, and not necessarily the problems you want to solve. You have to enjoy the act of solving whatever problem's in front of you. Because that's really what being a leader or CEO is all about. Who isn't putting the coffee back into the right place in the coffee room? Why wasn't the VAT return done last week? It's all these other things that have nothing to do with what you actually want to be doing, helping people or making products. But nonetheless, they have to be done because you've got to get those out of the way so you can get on with the other thing. So you really have to enjoy solving whatever's in front of you right then and there and getting on to the next thing. And I think that even goes to beyond the entrepreneur themselves. It's really building the people that, the team that you want, the people you want on your team. So as you're looking for those people who come on after the initial idea or after the entrepreneurs launch something, you want to look at the team that they build around them. And what really interests me in people that I want to bring on those teams are people who talk about what they don't know and are as proud about what they don't know and how they're solving it as what they actually do know. So if you come to somebody, if somebody comes in, they talk about their CV, I can read a CV, done. What I want to know is what they don't want to know, or sorry, what they don't know and they want to. What fascinates them? What motivates them to go and do something? And that could be that they're interested in how some widget works, and we can use that in a product. It may be that they're interested in how to motivate people. It may be interested in that they're interested in the customer themselves. Because ultimately, if you can't motivate that customer to buy something, it's all for naught. So one of the most interesting things you can have in a business is somebody who may not know anything about the business, but what they do know is about the customer's problem. And they do understand what is going to make that customer have a good day. And if we can help that customer have a good day, we're more likely to make a sale. And those are the kinds of people that I want to know, is the people who don't know and will tell me.
That's great insights. So you were, all three of you were incredibly open when it came to your entrepreneurial journey and your personal development. So let me, if I may, probe a little bit further and ask you, what was the one failure that you feel you learned the most from, that really set you on the track, and that was the pivotal moment that got you going? Fiona, what triggered it for you?
So it's kind of a hard question because I don't know that I see the failures as failures as such.
By no means.
I think all of the two businesses that ultimately were sort of wound up, I still learned huge amounts, and both of them had a lot of successes in other ways, and the failings as such taught me a huge amount. And so I don't know that I really see them as failures, more as a strong lesson, maybe. Uh-huh. Yeah, so I don't think I could really name one. I think probably the biggest thing I've learnt is to really listen to my gut and, don't procrastinate too long. If you know something isn't right, or a person in your business isn't right, change that as soon as you can. Don't sit and worry about being nice or not nice or whatever for 2 years, because 2 years is too late, and that's cost you a lot of money and growth, or affected everyone else in the business. Just change it, bite the bullet and do it.
So where did your non-failures but learning experiences come from?
I'm just very pleased you came to me second on that one, not first. too many to count is what it comes down to. But most of them, and maybe even all of them, I'd have to think about that for a while. But most of them come down to thinking about or considering myself first rather than the goals of the business. So when you're the CEO, when you're a leader of something, it's never about you. As soon as you start to solve any problem by this is what I want to do or this is the way I think it should be, you're probably framing it up in the wrong way. You're in an office when you're a CEO, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a leader. Other people are relying on you to keep in mind what the goals of that organization or that operation are. So what your personal feelings about it are, it may be important, they may inform you, it may put it in context, but that's not the fulcrum on which the decision should be made. So if it's about you, you're either framing it wrong or you're in the wrong job. And I could probably trace everything back, everything's a strong word, but many of the missteps I've made to thinking that this is not the way I want to do it. And that's not a good way to frame it up.
Thanks a lot. So Mary, what were your transformational moments?
I think for me it's a difficult question because I still think it's a journey of growth. I also don't see failure as a thing, and not in a kind of cliche coach way. I think that everything that doesn't work out the way you want it is just like hitting a roundabout. And it's kind of, where are the other routes off this roundabout? What did I learn? What did I grow? What would I do next time? So I just genuinely don't see failure as an issue. I think the things that have taught me would be that when I first got into the business, if I'm honest, I kind of thought, great, I've done this learning, I know everything, and this is the way I'm going to be. And actually, it was watching my own failures that taught me how to work better with clients. So, for example, just taking on far too much work and waking up at 4 a.m. with heart palpitations and thinking, oh my God, okay, actually I've got to make a decision here about what to cut. Also recognizing the skills I don't have. So I'm terrible at strategy. I can strategize brilliantly with clients, but strategizing around my business, absolutely awful. So I have good friends who are great with strategy who help me through that. So I think I would see it as almost little stumblings where I've kind of almost tripped over and almost sort of said, oh, I thought I was further along that journey than I am. But that in itself is such a big learning and growth. And then it's also, I call it with my clients, a pure honesty. It's getting to a point of pure honesty with yourself where you're able to say, I'm good at this, I'm terrible at this, I'm kind of okay on that, this is a skill I need to learn. And so for me, it can't be failure, it can only be learning and growth. That's how I would view it. But it was almost recognizing that so my own, I still have a therapist and a coach that I talk to, and quite often their answer to any question I have is, well, that's because you're human. And I do like to think that sometimes that, I'm not so human anymore. So those are still my little trips where I fall flat on my face and go, oh, okay, I still haven't quite sorted that out. But yeah.
Thanks a lot.
One more thing. I think it's important to remember that not everything is ever going to work.
Yeah.
There's always going to be things that don't work, and if you can't cope with things not working or failing, whatever word you want to use, you're probably in the wrong business because it will happen.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I also wanted to ask the two female entrepreneurs in this panel what your experience as a woman as an entrepreneur was. Do you feel that you encountered particular adversity or maybe even advantages being a female entrepreneur? What was your experience, Fiona?
Probably yes to
both
questions.
Is your experience?
Yes. I'm in a very male-dominated world as well, so frequently I'll be the only woman there. Same with science and tech, but there's a lot more men than women in it. So, broken it. That don't take long to get. yeah, I think sometimes you can maybe not get taken as seriously, or you have to, as a woman, put your point across stronger, or as Sheryl Sandberg says, you have to lean in harder. You know, make sure you stick your hand up, make sure you make your voice heard. But equally, there's pros because you're the only woman in the room, so you get remembered. You know, if there's 30 people in the room and you're the only girl, they'll probably remember you than the 20 of the guys. So, you know, there's pros and cons both ways. You just have to, I don't know, I suppose, yes, sometimes it's tougher for women, but equally remember that not everything is just because you're a woman. Sometimes you need to actually just make your voice heard, and use the pros from it as well. I mean, you know, if you are the only woman in the room, milk it.
Well, Mary, what's your experience, both as an entrepreneur and a coach?
I think it's the same thing. Sometimes it's really useful and sometimes it's not. We were talking just before we started, and I was saying I'm actually shutting my business down on Facebook because I just get continuous marriage proposals rather than clients, which is lovely, but 3 times a week's become a bit much. And I don't know any other male coaches and therapists that get that. So it is really frustrating when you have a really important message that you're trying to give out, and comments on my hair and my clothing and things like that. However, do I think some of that is related to women? I know men who get comments on their clothing and how they look and things like that too. So I think for me the biggest problem for me being a female has been actually male leaders and entrepreneurs believing that I can't understand their journey, and saying to me, well, you're not a man, so how do you know how it feels to be me? And actually, for me, the way I work with my clients is I don't need to know what you even do because I'm working with you as a human being. So I think it has its positives, and I agree with you. Somebody once said to me, if you're in a room full of men in suits, wear a red dress, because it's going to make you really memorable. So I would definitely say that actually, I use it to my advantage in that way, in the same way that I hope a man might say, I'm going to wear a red suit. But if people wish to make those judgments, I think the thing I found really difficult in the beginning and had to sort of take to supervision actually was getting clients because of the way that I looked. So I got a lot of clients who just liked me, came to me because of my personality. And my supervisor's view was, yes, but once you've got them in the room, you can still do the work with them. And actually, that's what I want to do. I want to work with them. So if you want to come into the room because you think I've got a pretty dress on or something, fine, come in the room because I'm still going to take your money and make you well.
There you go.
So yeah, positives and negatives.
Thanks so much. Last question in that to that topic. Do you feel that the atmosphere has changed, or that the way you say acted as a female entrepreneur and coach 10 years ago is different from today?
I think it has. Definitely, I think 10 years ago, it was very much, you needed to have your makeup on and be in heels, which are not natural to me at all. I think a statistic I was quoted once was that you're 67 times more likely to get a job as a woman if you have makeup and heels on. So I played that game in the early days and now I don't. So I definitely think it's changed. But I think that since the Me Too movement, I think there's been a lot of damage done between male-female relationships. And actually for the last year, I've been very much supporting and promoting men. So I see men coming into my room sort of saying, who am I, what am I daren't look at a woman, touch a woman, where I would have just naturally had that human contact. And so I'm all about bringing men and women together to discuss that, and to try to readdress that balance, because we're all here to function together. So I do think there's been a change. It's sort of women's rights have come up, but men's have kind of dropped down, and I'm a mother of 3 boys, so I'm really uncomfortable with that. I was actually keynote speaker on National Men's Awareness Day, which is quite sad, really. So I think women have seen much more for being, as you said, leaning in, being in their sort of power as much as men are. But I see a detriment to men at the same time, which I hope we can readdress.
Thanks very much. I wanted to close my round of questions by asking each of you what the qualities are that you look for in both yourself and aspiring entrepreneurs. Wart, do you want to make the start?
You can't do it first this time. Yeah, so I think it is all about problem solving. As you say, things don't go ever the way you expect them to. Almost by definition, when you're starting a new business or creating a new product or whatever, no one's done quite that thing before. So you're going to encounter things that haven't been encountered before, or perhaps in that configuration before. So it is about the ability to keep in mind why you're doing it. So there's some things that may be more fun to do. There's things that may be more cool. We may well nowadays there's a lot of emphasis on how much money you've raised. Okay. That doesn't mean anything about the business necessarily. It means you've raised money. It doesn't necessarily mean that your product is validated by a customer. It doesn't mean that you've put people in the business that are the right people there. It means you've convinced somebody with money to give you money. So if you're selling the business, maybe that's what you're trying to do, but it doesn't necessarily value or validate the value proposition. And business is about solving problems for people and getting them to pay you to solve their problems. Simply raising money doesn't necessarily do that. It could be a means to an end, and for that reason, brilliant, absolutely fantastic. But it isn't in itself a victory and a way to measure yourself. So it's things like that. It's people that can keep their priorities straight. So they know why they're doing what they're doing, they can justify it, and at any point in their activities or the business activities, they can draw a line between where they are or where the business is and revenue. And unless you can draw that line between where you are and revenue, you really need to question whether you have a business or not.
Fiona, what are your thoughts? What are you looking for?
I think, yes, you've got to, all the things that Ward said, you know, you need to be able to problem solve, you need to be able to work hard, because it's going to be hard work. You need to be pretty resilient, I suppose, because things can and do go wrong. Not everyone is going to love what you're doing. So you need to be able to really believe in your journey, but you need a healthy dose of realism in there as well. And if people are giving you honest advice, maybe you think you've got the greatest idea since sliced bread, but 90% of people you talk to are saying no, it's not. You need to be able to take that on board as well. So I don't know. I think it's a combination of things. I don't think there's any one trait really. It's I was going to say being able to be organised, but I work with a coach as well, and that's helped me be a lot more organised. I tend to keep it all in my head and expect that everyone else can follow that. So I think that's been a big turning point actually in that kind of thing. So I think accepting that you need help in areas and identifying what you're not good at, and either getting a team on board to help you with that, or outsourcing help, and acknowledging that is a part of what you need to do, because nobody's good at everything. Everyone's going to need help at some point. There's always, and there's a finite amount of work that one person can do. So I suppose having enough humility to accept that you do need help, whether it's direct help in the company or sort of coaching and that kind of thing. I think that can really help change your mentality as well for the better.
I couldn't agree more. So this quality of being teachability, is in my view a huge predictor of success, because you're just able to develop faster. So, well, Mary, you've got a book coming out, The Fulfilled Leader. What does your book say about the qualities we should be looking in for
I think
entrepreneurs?
the book, in some respects, is about you as a human being, And it's basically based around some principles, and the principles are you have to like and love yourself, which sounds, really easy to do, but it took me 45 years to learn to do. And actually, once you have your self-worth in place, you'll be productive, you'll make good decisions, you'll be honest with yourself about what's right for you. And it basically is how to be a happy human. It's kind of almost could have been another title. And I agree with what both of you have said. It's being an entrepreneur and a business owner, like I say, I stumbled into it. In some respects, your passion, you have to not just have passion, because your passion is going to be this much of the business. And actually the business is going to be all of this as well. And if you haven't got the resilience and the ability to say, I'm struggling here, I can't do this, you're not going to succeed however good you are. And I see a lot of people in my field who are amazing coaches and therapists, and they just don't build because actually they're not as engaged in the business side of it as well. And for me, I had no business background at all when I came into it, and I've asked and I've learned and I've read and I've studied, and it's resilience and it's humility and it's building the right team around you, but it is holding on to why am I doing this and who am I doing it for, and that can sometimes be very different to what is the market value of this, and it's really that kind of precise thing when the market value and the need of the client hits your passion and your skill set and your drive, and it's bringing all of those together. Yes, so the book is kind of about how to be the best version of yourself, because then the rest of it really clicks into place.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll open up now for questions from the audience. We have to ask you to please speak into the microphone because this is recorded and transmitted.
Thank you so much for the talk. It was really interesting. So I have a question. Like now in the era of entrepreneurship, we have all like kind of master in entrepreneurship programs going on, and everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. But I want to ask about your thoughts. Do you think that it's certain kind of personal characteristics that makes an entrepreneur successful or an entrepreneur, or is just the experience that leads them to be an entrepreneur or the spotting an opportunity? What's your thought about it?
It's a great question. Who wants to have a first stab?
I'll take a shot at that one. I would think an entrepreneur is somebody who is usefully frustrated. So they know things can be different, but rather than just sitting around belly aching about it and complaining about it, they take some hopefully positive step towards solving it. So I think an entrepreneur is somebody who's usefully frustrated in my mind.
Do you think like it's like within like among you three are an entrepreneur? Do you think that it's your certain characteristic which you have common in between that makes you guys an entrepreneur than the rest of the people? Like, do you think like it's just like you have certain characteristics that makes you an entrepreneur?
Well, maybe as Ward said, it's that drive to actually do something rather than just sit and complain. And yeah, I think that's probably my biggest driver. Really, is I want to make it better, and it's something I'm passionate about. I'm not sure it's possible to run a business and start a business if you don't have an underlying passion for that subject.
Hi. This is a question specifically for Florian and Dr. Hills, but Fiona and Mary, please, if you can add, please do so. Specifically for you as investors. I'm currently in the MBA program here at Judge, and there's a big juxtaposition between coming up with a great idea, building your business plan, and then pitching it to investors, or taking your business directly to customers through the minimal viable product, and slowly but surely kind of, iterating your business forward. As investors, when you have someone that comes to you and pitches an idea, is it a massive red flag when they've gone directly, business plan straight to pitching it, and they've not really, tried to come up with the most basic idea? Obviously, there are certain industries where you can do that, certain where you can't. And they've just directly gone and started asking for money instead of really said, listen, let me go test out and see if someone's willing to pay for this. Is that a big red flag for you guys as investors? And Mary and Fiona, if you've had experience with this yourself, pitching to investors, please, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a red flag, but I would certainly say it is something to be looked into, and something where I would sit down with the entrepreneur and see, does he have the drive to address really the question whether there is a market for him, whether there are customers for him. It's an unanswered question, and when you work with early stage entrepreneurs, you can't expect them to have every question answered. So you take them by the hand and get them there. But what absolutely needs to happen is that they need to be teachable, and that together you can get there. What are your thoughts?
I think it is a red flag, simply because I need to have the risk in everything reduced to the lowest level possible at any one time. And we won't go too far into this, but entrepreneurs are seen as risk takers. I don't think that's true. I think entrepreneurs are risk reducers. And if you're going to pitch something to me and you haven't brought me the most basic piece of information, will someone buy it? I'm kind of wonder why. So
I think I'd wonder a little bit how invested you are if you're not willing to invest yourself, time and money before going to someone else for their money.
Thank you for the insight. It was great. I think this is my question specifically for Fiona, but if anyone else would like to dive in, be happy. Like, I really resonated with I did this, and then I got bored, and then I did this. That really resonated with me. So, I mean, the challenge is how do you reconcile those two worlds? Obviously, you're doing something now that hopefully you are really enjoying and really love, and the horses, obviously, it's going to always be part of your journey. But I think that urge, how do you sort of start to maybe reconcile that urge or deal with it? What's your advice there?
I suppose I've just found something that still keeps challenging me all the time, every day. If it's not one thing, it's another. There's no time to get bored, really. And there's other products that I want to work on, but sometimes you have to get money in before you can develop those products. It's been very much a challenge every day and a very steep learning curve, which never seems to reduce. So far I'm not bored. Yeah, but it's not really one thing, because I think when you're running something like that and you're developing products in particular, there's always another product that you want to do. If there's not, you're probably going to die a death at some point. And there's always, whilst we've grown to a point where this year we're now on pretty much every continent, so we're now focusing on growing those, sales within those territories. That's another challenge now, is to grow it there. So yes, we've got in there, and now we need to grow it. So there is always a challenge every day. So far it's kept me going.
And I just wanted to add, if that's all right, one of the things I teach my clients is about having a sort of internal recalibration scale that's almost going all the time. The view being that these things that you get bored of are not a waste of time. That actually there's learning and growth in there, and it comes back to what you were saying about being a problem solver. Even in my business, which looks like it's the same thing, I started out as a parent coach, I then worked with employees, it's kind of done this and that. And that's been partly the clients that have come naturally to me, but it's also been my own levels of interest and problem solving. I'm seeing this problem here and this problem here. If 10 years ago you'd said, will you be a leadership coach? I would have said, why? But actually now I'm going, because I need world peace, so therefore I need to work here, and etc. So if you have an internal recalibration of why am I bored? What's the bit I've lost? What's the bit I still like? How can I take the bit I still like and build that into something else? To me, when I look at any company that's grown, it's grown from having that calibration of this isn't working, where do I go? So trust your instincts. If you get really bored of something, take the learning and move on.
Boring can be good. If there's nothing interesting happening, no problems to solve, maybe everything's going okay, and people are just, it is a possibility. So it could mean that people are just buying the product. Okay, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Shweta. I'm doing my MBA right now at Judges, and my past has been a neurologist in the clinical role. So I have a question, which is, we do hear a lot of successful entrepreneurial stories, but not so successful entrepreneurial stories are not much published. So what is the level of persistence that is required to go into that category of being published? So I'm sure there are a lot of unpublished stories, but what is that, the persistence, the number, the quantification, so to speak, to reach there, Thank you.
Probably whatever you think and times by 10. I mean, you've only got to read, Richard Branson's story, or, there's plenty others out there, how many times they've started something and no, that hasn't worked, so we've closed that business down or started another one. And, I think, persistence is probably a pretty major component. Whatever drives that. I mean, sort of empathise with what you were saying about childhood, and I suppose some of that's what's driven me, is that need to always want to do better. So this thing hasn't worked out, then you're just driven to keep trying to make better and do better next time. I think that's where sometimes you need to take a dose of reality and make a proper assessment on whether it's worth persisting, or are you just persisting for persistence sake.
I think that comes down to what I was saying also about, it's not just about your passion. So I could have trained in just training as a coach and therapist, but the business is part of that. And part of the reason that you hear certain stories is because people are promoting, they're running a business, and they're building a profile. So I think there's a big business element of what you hear as much as what you see. It is putting yourself out there. So for me, if your mindset isn't clear enough, your self-worth isn't good enough, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I'd sat on this panel, I'd have said no. I wouldn't have put myself into this situation because I wouldn't have had the confidence. But now I'm out there going, okay, this might make me a bit nervous, but I'm going to do it because I'm running a big business, and also because I want to share my ideas. So I think that's part of it. And I think it is exactly what you were saying. I'm not big into celebrities. I don't admire many of them. But I do love Richard Branson for the fact I think he's a bit like a child that kind of trips over, grazes his knees and kind of goes, oh, and then gets up and does something else. And that's my attitude, is, okay, that didn't work. Where next? Where do we move on? And I think that's what you're saying. Is that just persistent? I'm just going to get back up again. And I do think that's possibly a character trait. I know my father tells a story of me being 2 and walking across a very deeply ploughed field, and it was icy, and he said every single rut I would trip into and fall down. And he would say, shall I carry you? And I'd just go, no, and I'd carry on. And I certainly, when I look around me at people who are running successful businesses, they just have that, I'm just not giving up. And I might adapt, I might change, I might start something else up. And it is that internal knowledge that you talk about of knowing, I need to stop doing this, either because I'm not enjoying it or because it's not working, but I'm still moving on.
I just wanted to ask about strategy, actually, for all your businesses. Fiona, you were saying that your business is 5 years old, and I wondered, all of you actually, but Fiona, because you said your business was 5 years old, at what point do you realise that I'm now ready to upscale, or I've got to change strategy? How rigid is your strategy right from the start, or is it an organic process that just moves along with what's going on with the business and the people you're meeting and the networking, and your mentor is saying, maybe try this?
To be completely honest, I didn't have a strategy. I've literally sort of in the last 18 months, 2 years, actually started doing a structured strategy. Always kind of had a rough plan in my head, but of course I wasn't telling everyone else that because it's in my head and they should just be able to read it. So I've been much more structured about that in the last 18 months or so, but it still had to change because, things outside of your control happen. maybe you can't get, for us in motorsport specifically, because we've got to comply with so many regulations and things. Sometimes we just can't get the right materials or whatever to do a project, or it's taken 6 months longer to source them or a year longer to source them. So, with prime thing is socks, we're trying to do it, and you would think socks would be really simple, wouldn't you? But it's been a nightmare trying to source the right things to actually make a product that I'm happy with to send out. So, yes, I think you can have a strategy, but I don't think it can ever be set in stone. I think you've got to be prepared to change it and review it. And I think, we had a big strategy meeting with sort of March, April time, and we literally just sat down again a month ago and reviewed that because maybe because of supply problems and finding the right materials. So yeah, it's got to be a constantly evolving thing depending on what's happening within the business and outside forces. Another product we were developing just got it to where I thought, yeah, this is quite good. And then the FIA changed all their regulations for next year. And I was like, well, there's no point in making it if we're going to have a 3-year lifespan, 2 to 3 year lifespan. So revised that, binned that, and I think hopefully we'll be able to put that into a different marketplace. But for the moment, that's had to be parked. So yeah, it is a constantly evolving structure for me anyway.
And as they say, no plan of attack survives the first contact with the enemy. But crafting the plan of attack is still incredibly useful. Strategy teaches us, but strategy is nothing but is certainly not constant.
It's helped a lot as well, actually, to make a hard and fast strategy, because it's actually something to hold you accountable and gives you a good benchmark to start assessing, I suppose, how things are moving and how you think they might be doing versus how they actually are. So I found it a really useful tool to start doing.
It very much is. But I think you need also to separate the idea of a strategy and a plan. So the strategy is a statement of what you're trying to achieve or what you think the problem is, your diagnosis of it, essentially. And then you can set up some principles of, given that we're trying to be the low-cost provider. If anything in the plan that we're going to come on to in a moment causes the cost to go above a certain level, that's outside the strategy. So we're not going to do that. So you set up know what the problem is, know how how you're going to attack it, then set up some principles so everybody understands those principles throughout the entire organization. So your buyers know not to buy the expensive equipment. They know to buy these lower equipment. But there's another principle. It has to perform to a certain level. So it has to be below this price and above that performance. Well, that gets you into a certain lane of activity, this sort of thing. So once you have the problem statement out and then you understand the means by which you're going to attack that problem, then you can actually start to do the plans. And then you end up with these looking forward the best you can. And if your product has a regulatory aspect to it, you need to know what the regulatory environment is, and probably also, very importantly, when the review points for the regulatory environment is, because those are weak points. So your world may change when a standard or a regulation is reviewed. So you need to know where those are. And then the plan is your best guess into the future, and it is always evolving and always changing. So we always try to put together time going out this way and several categories going up this way. These are the customers we're trying to attack, trying to win. These are the kind of the products we need to have in place in order to win those customers. These are the technologies we have to have in place to support those products to win those customers and work all the way down. And if at any point this component becomes too expensive, we've got to find some other route through that. Or if the regulations change it and the pricing structure changes, we need to change the plans going forward. So you need to have some idea of where you are with respect to those customers so that you know what the options for change are.
I think just from my point of view, obviously, for me to build my business, it was a low-cost build. I just went out and started working with people, and to be honest, probably for the first 3 years, I was incredibly lazy. I worked by referral, I didn't do any marketing, business naturally grew. But for me, because I was always trying to learn about business as much as I was learning about my skill set, actually I did do the weekend here. 5 years I've been running as well, so I did the initial, I can't remember the weekend, what it's called here, but it's like a lovely business MBA in a weekend, which was really useful to kind of skew my head away from that's my skill set and I'm good at that to what's this business that I'm running here. And on the last year, I've also been on a business accelerator as well. And I think certainly for me, what that did was say, okay, so you know your skill set here and you know that's working. Where do you actually want to go? And it did really upscale my thoughts of creating a bigger business. You know, the book is part of that. And so I now do have a strategy of, I know that I want to work up with the world leaders because I want to create big world change. How do I get to them? What are the steps for me to take it? Rather than just kind of hoping that one day I might get referred, you know. So I think it's worth having that. But like you, it was I was almost in my comfort zone for 3 years, just going, hey, this is working and it pays the bills and isn't this all fun and good? And what it did was kind of get my brain and kind of really upscale it. So I would always say, if what you do comes really naturally and it's working, then just think, and where else am I going?
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I'm very much interested in the well-being side of entrepreneurship. So do you ever detach from your businesses? Do you rest during the week? Do you go on holidays? Yeah, all this stuff. Yeah, the question maybe for all of you, if you can share a little bit.
I would say it's a work in progress. Working with a coach again has helped that and helped me recognise that you have to stop peddling sometimes, and actually you think better and you think clearer for having a break, because you can get so caught up in it, and when you're working, I must get more done, and you actually stop looking at the big picture, and as the owner you need to look at the big picture. That's really helped me. Well, as much as I knew that at one level, actually bring that to the forefront and actively start to manage my time better to allow that to happen.
I think it's really difficult when you love what you do, because it becomes, certainly for me, it's not what I do, it's who I am. And so there are definitely days, well, most days, when I'm, bumbling about the back of my head is what's going on for my clients, what can I do? I was really lucky that I took part in some research which showed, with electrodes on my head, which showed that actually when you have downtime, your brain is more creative. And your everyday, kind of like we're doing now, actually kind of not lots going on. And having a visual of that, which I use for clients, to remind me to go, actually, I'm tired. So I would say my work is always on my mind, but it's not always what I'm doing. So actually, I'm very lucky. I work from home. Sometimes I'll nap in the middle of the day if I'm tired. I will flex my day around social engagements, but then I'll work at the weekend. So keeping in that, it's okay for me to love what I do. It's okay for me to have my business on my mind all the time, but I still need to eat well, sleep well, exercise well, see my friends, and have that downtime, even if I'm talking to my friends about my business. But it's recognizing physically where you are. So for me, my tell is that my shoulders will come up. When my shoulders come up and my back's really stiff, I'm like, okay, hang on, I pushed myself a bit too far here. But it is hard when you love what you do.
I think I got kind of pushed into making changes as well because I got a really bad concussion. So I've got post-concussion syndrome as well. So I think I didn't want to recognise that I'd changed because of that. And maybe I couldn't keep pedaling away as much as I would like to or did traditionally. So that in some ways forced me into making some changes, and part of that was getting a coach and helping look at how I spent my time and constructively spend my time.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how to answer this one, actually. I'm notoriously bad for not taking vacations. I'm well known for that. Yeah, you do need to get away from things. And what I've been trying to teach myself to do, and I emphasize the word trying, is to step out of the business as much as possible. to look at it from other points of view. And the closest I've gotten to that is to put myself in situations where I'm with people who aren't like me. And what I end up doing, and this was inadvertent, but it's turned out to be quite handy, is they ask me what I do, or they ask me why are we doing it, and I'm forced to explain what I do. And I found that's very healthy because they tend to ask, because they're not in the businesses I'm in, they don't have the background I do, they completely other backgrounds, they tend to ask questions from their perspective and their framework. And I have to put things in their terms, which makes me think through why is it I'm doing what I'm doing. And I found that to be quite therapeutic and quite useful because it gets rid of a lot of the chaff, a lot of the excess in what you're doing. It really gets down to the core motivations and the useful activities, I guess, is what it comes down to. So I always try to get around people where I don't have a common vocabulary. And this is one thing I found when I was traveling quite a lot. I think you should be illiterate at least twice a year. Go to a country where you don't even not just speak the language, but it's a completely different alphabet, and find your way around. And you'll find out very quickly how quick you think, how well you can communicate without actually using words, and it does focus the mind. So it's quite refreshing. So I guess that's what I do to be to refresh myself is become illiterate. So I don't know I'm not quite sure what to think of that now that I've said that. So.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. Hi. I wanted to ask you guys, as investors, what do you look for when someone is pitching an idea to you guys?
I think what I said earlier on, a very clear path between wherever you are and revenue. There's a lot more to it, but along that journey, you'll have to add all the bits on that you need. Everything from intellectual property to team to plan to marketing and communications. If you can draw a very, very clear line from wherever you are to revenue and then a steady stream of revenue after that, that's really what you're going to hear, that story. And defensible all the way, not just we hope to do this, we hope to do that, but document it. That's what it comes down to.
I'd add maybe one or two soft factors. One is I really need to see the drive in the team. And I like to invest in businesses that at least have a fighting chance to change the world. So there must be big ambition behind what anybody is trying to do.
Hi, I'm Kong. I'm an MBA student here. So I have a question to the four of you. So let's say a company is preparing for Series A fundraisings. How do the owner of the company know how much the company is worth and how much to raise? And lastly, how much equity stake to give away to be considered a reasonable level? Thanks.
That's a very tough question, and there's probably a million answers. Yeah. So I typically say valuing a business that goes out for Series A correctly is nearly impossible. So it is much more of, call it an auction opportunity. I mean, what's the demand to invest in your business? How well is the business plan put together? And then the rule of thumb for the entrepreneur is, what's the minimum set of milestones that you want to achieve with the money you raise for your Series A? And then can you find investors that dilute you by ideally less than 20, maybe 15%. So that's really what you want to achieve. But achieving it, that's the art. That's not a science.
I think that's an excellent answer. The only thing I'd add to that is the strategy for it is to reduce the risk in the investor's mind to the greatest degree. So the biggest factor in all of those numbers you want is the discount factor. It's how risky is this? How well do I know these numbers? So the better you can document the numbers and make those bulletproof, the less wiggle room anybody's going to have, and the better argument you have for whatever valuation you're putting forward.
You all have spoken about the difficulties that you've encountered building your own businesses and pushing yourselves forward. Could you just enlighten us a bit into how you've managed to kind of stay on that the razor edge of portraying a lot of confidence towards your employees, towards your investors, towards everybody else, but on the inside, obviously, you've got a lot of doubts, you've got a lot of things that are keeping you awake at night. Is it just a question of being very honest with yourself and with everybody else and saying, listen, I'm panicking on the inside and I'm only human, or is it the case that it's a veneer that is never cracked on the inside, no one will see what's going on the outside, you look like the most confident person in the world? I mean, what are your personal coping strategies for that?
Yeah. The analogy that always comes to my mind when they ask that question is that of a duck. From one perspective, a duck has iridescent feathers and glides along on a nice pond. From another perspective, it's paddling, making bubbles, and just pushing and making waves all it can. So perspective is everything. And I think somebody who constantly portrays confidence either isn't pushing themselves or isn't stopping to listen. So I'd worry about that. But you do need to give people confidence in where you're going. You do need to make a decisive decision. It may be the right decision. It may be a decision because people need a direction, and we'll figure it out a little bit down the way. So confidence is important. Humility is very important, as you mentioned. But you're not going to fool anybody if you're out there and playing the uber confident person. I know exactly where I'm going. Anybody knows exactly where they're going actually isn't moving anywhere. Yeah.
There's a difference between being confident and cocky as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's important as well to remember the goals, the targets or the good things that you've achieved. When things are tough, you have to remember, one that sticks in my mind was 2 of our retailers phoning us and telling us in year 4 that we'd just outsold one of the competitors for them. So it was like, yes, that was a big win. And you have to keep in mind all those little wins along the way and use them in the bad times.
I think for me, it's an interesting thing because obviously I'm working with mental health. So, I do have to be careful how I portray myself to my clients. Obviously, if they, think I'm falling apart all the time, I'm not a great advert for my work. But I think one of the reasons that I stepped out to have my own company was I sort of did what I do within a school. I worked with parents. And I just found there was so much red tape with the things that I wanted to do that it actually prevented me helping my clients. And what I was always told was that the fact that I shared my own troubles, my difficulties with my own parenting and my difficulties with myself was one of the reasons that clients came to me. They wanted to see that I'd done their journey. And so it's really important to get that balance between if I haven't been through what you've been through, I've been somewhere like it. Because certainly I would want somebody to have done that journey before I trust them with who I am. But it's also really important to balance it. And an example of this I can give is that I separated from my partner in May, and it was actually a really positive, healthy decision for me. And one of my clients actually noticed, because he used to come early in the morning, so he noticed there was a car that wasn't there. And I just very openly said to him, yeah, actually we've separated. It's a really healthy decision. I'm really pleased, and it's all the work that I've done, all this stuff that we're doing together, I said, is what's made me be able to do this and feel so positive a week later. I'm in a great mindset. And he just went, wow, I want your mindset. So it was a really good selling tool. But it was, nice. it was being able to say, I've done that journey, and actually I'm here, and you might be here on that journey, but I'm here, and look what can happen when you're here on that journey. And I think, that it's the same thing with businesses. It's recognizing your client may be here, but you might be here even if you're struggling, and not being afraid to share that. But there is a real balance, I think, to doing that. And you have to kind of find that yourself, depending on your business and your product.
I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we'll be having opportunities to answer any questions and get into a hopefully even deeper discussion outside, where we've got drinks prepared, and maybe some nibbles. Fantastic.